Good morning. Welcome to another episode of Cooper's Cogitations. I'd like this day to visit with you concerning the woman Eve. Eve was married with Adam. That's interesting. Adam is also known as Michael, the archangel, in the first presidency of creation, in the first presidency of salvation, in the first presidency of the universe. Adam is a god. I don't have any notion that Eve was one less of a person. In fact, Eve is one of the three greatest women to have walked Earth. I really like Eve. Now, that said, in the book of Abraham, Eve is not mentioned. I have not found the word Eve in the book of Abraham. In the book of Moses, Eve is mentioned for the first time in a verse 4 when when Satan is tempting Eve, which is very interesting because in the temple, which I consider to be the literal understanding of Eve, as soon as Adam is created, brought to earth, Eve is brought to earth, and Adam names her. So literally, in the first instance, Eve is identified. It's interesting because when we are organized as spirits, when we are birthed as spirits from our Heavenly Mother and Heavenly Father, when we come out of our Heavenly Mother, we have an organization, we have an identity, and we have a gender. Here on earth, when we were birthed, we have an organization, an identity, and a gender. So Eve is organized, has a gender, but she's not identified. In the book of Genesis, it's talked in one chapter about how the woman is created, and then she's tempted, and then she falls, and then in the next chapter, she's identified as Eve. I think that's a metaphor where the temple gives us the literal, factual. The scriptures give us a metaphor. The metaphor is this: without an identity, Eve, the woman, is tempted and falls. What does that mean for you and I? That means when you and I do not have an identity, we will fall. Satan will come for us and we will fall. Excuse me. In the process, God, in his infinite wisdom and understanding and knowledge, gives us an identity. Our identity happens when we're baptized. We're baptized into the family of Christ. We're the children of Christ. We take his name upon us. And at our baptism, we are consecrated. We will follow him. We will bear witness of him in all times, in all things, in all places. Where do you live and not be consecrated? That's from our baptism. Every week in the sacrament, we do the same thing. We go to the temple. Our last covenant is consecration. We are identified with Christ. With this identity, we have commandments. The commandments act as a shield. I grew up in the 50s, and we had my two brothers and friends on the streets. We had wars. We would make wooden shields, we would have wooden swords, and we would beat those shields. We would see what we could break. We would be very vigorous, very vigorous. And we had blood weeds, and blood weeds grew to various sizes, But when they were just a little bigger than your thumb or around the size of your thumb, we used them as spears. As spears. In one of our wars, I caught one in my eye. I had 8 splinters of wood in my eye for a week. Gee. What's the point? The point is the shield that protects us, the commandments that protects us from Satan as he beats upon us. We can shatter his club. We can shatter his sword. But the splinters can come get us. You got to be careful of the splinters as well as the open, outright, upfront, hostile attacks. The subterfuge, the clandestine activities. You have to be careful. And that's why you have the shield. But that's one part of the shield. The other part of the shield is the commandments are a mirror. The commandments, when we keep the commandments, it changes our nature so that we become more like Christ. His light shines in us. We become more like Christ. And that light changes. We're born again. If you didn't know better, what you would have to say is that the scriptures, the temple, the gospel comes from a Father in heaven who is actually a God. Thank you.